So I'm going to take a bit of a different tact, and I know we talked about, and there is a lot of risks, 100% agree, and the evaluation is a big thing. So I got to talk to you later about what we're trying to do in terms of that, and how we can't intermingle that with the regulatory process. But what I want to talk about is I've got like 3 major topics that I'm going to talk about today. And has anybody heard this concept of AI as the bicycle for the mind? So Steve Jobs talked about this. Anybody heard this one? I'm going to go through it pretty quick. And I'm going to give, and so each one of these, what I'm going to do is I'm going to present the topic, and I got 15 minutes, so I got to blow through this really quick. And then I'm going to give you 2 use cases, 1 or 2 use cases for each one to kind of highlight these. And so I'm going to start off with and then I'm going to go through some really cool stuff in, if anybody's heard of these foundational models, and agentic AI, which is kind of a new thing, and then AI knows things that we never taught it. So I'm going to start with this, and if anybody's seen this, sorry if it's boring, but so this was a paper in Scientific America in 1973, and it was just looking, and I won't go into it, I'm actually Canadian, so all these units make sense to me, but I'd be here for like the next half an hour trying to explain. But basically, it's looking at the efficiency of different types of mammals, and man was a little bit disappointing. He was way down here, a third of the way down, and who won actually was this condor, which is this giant bird, and I found this picture with 2 people holding one, just so you can get the idea of scale. And it's got like a 6-foot wingspan. So it basically can flap its wings and then glide. It's very, very efficient. But what's interesting in this article, and this was 1973, they actually put man on bicycle who actually beat the condor. So it was really neat that somebody thought to do that. And so the concept is, and Steve Jobs talked about how the Mac computer would be the bicycle for the mind back in the day when he was building computers. And now we're, a lot of the folks over at OpenAI are saying, is it the bicycle for the mind? So that is, we always stress this, that we're not going to take the human out of the loop. And this is really important. So this is why this concept is very important. I'm going to give you 2 use cases on how it's a bicycle for the mind. So these are statistics from the US. 1 in 9 men will get prostate cancer, and 1 in 41 will not survive. And it's true for lung too. Lung cancer is a high death rate. And it usually starts with the patient. So, and I want to dial this back to, we've got, AI is the bicycle for the mind and it's supporting the clinician. This dials back to everything I'm going to talk about today is for the benefit of the patient, and we can't lose sight of that. So the patient needs a prostate exam. We usually use MR to do this, and traditionally this was a very long exam on the top. And so in MR, you can actually, the longer you're in the magnet, the more clarity you get from the image, and it's a nice, clean, clear image. The issue is we've got backlogs, and there's something, the statistic is like something like 70 or 77 million men need to be screened in the US. So we just can't get there from where we are today with the equipment and the shortage of radiologists, and we talked about a number of the factors. So what if we could, without compromising image quality, we could actually just speed the scan up? So this is the bicycle working in behind, but there's a human that's actually taking the image. Well, there is such a thing called Air Recon DL, which is a deep learning algorithm that just reconstructs the image. And you can see the top one was the traditional image that we did a very long scan, and the bottom one was done through Air Recon DL. And we can do this for motion for patients, pediatric patients that have to hold their breath and try to sit still, as well as elderly patients that are constantly moving. And so this is just kind of, a scan that's done faster without compromising the image quality. This was actually, so I'm actually a Canadian, and this was, bragging rights. We developed this in Canada, or one of our research scientists, Mark LaBelle, and he started, I'm going to talk about generative AI and later on in the talk, but he used generative AI techniques, started with photos of his family and then reconstructed those, and then went on to MR images. And then a shout out to our friends over at Bot Image, Randy and the team over there. This is a very, all these things are point solutions. I'm going to talk about, this is kind of where we are today, and I'm going to talk about how we're going to get to the future. So this is really a really neat program, and because I was talking about prostate cancer, it does the detection, and then it highlights the lesions, and it actually gives a PIRAD score. So this is really helping. We've started to use this at a number of centers. One of them is at Stanford. So they're looking at, they have very few radiologists. I think it was 5 or 6 that are body radiologists that can read these. So they're starting to try to use AI to support, newer or less trained radiologists to be able to read these prostate exams. So this is really a bicycle for the mind, and some of the early indications that we've heard anecdotal is that they're actually learning from the AI, and I'm going to get into that in the last section of this talk about how we can learn things from AI, and AI is constantly learning from us. Okay, so I'm going to go into these multimodal. This is really complex, but and the session this morning was a great layup for this. So why have we not achieved a lot using AI? AI is this like massive, awesome technology that we've set this super high bar for. Why haven't we achieved much? And the reason is because we've used these point-to-point solutions. I'm going to go through really quick this analogy. I love it because Thomas Edison was the founder of General Electric, and one of our definitely one of our heroes at General Electric. But I don't know if you knew this, but he developed the light bulb back in 1875. But electricity didn't really get into factories until the 1920s. And this was an awesome technology. If we think about the changes that electricity has made to all of our lives, it's an awesome technology. But I love this concept. It takes more than a big idea to change the world. And so we've got the big idea of AI now. We're trying to change healthcare, but we're not there. We're using these point-to-point solutions that are single points. So what happened within the electricity industry was they had these steam engines, and in the factories they had these giant shafts that were hooked up to the steam engine and belts running all these looms that looked something like this. So when they started to use electricity, they just pulled out the steam engine and they put an electrical motor in. So it wasn't really a big benefit, and they're like, it's kind of similar, right? But where they really started to realize the benefit and the adoption came in was when they decided to change around the factory. So like small steam engines weren't very effective, so you couldn't just put a small steam engine over here. And so typically you'd have to run the steam engine, all those belts were running, all the machines were running at once, even if you wanted to do a little item. So now we could move around people, we could put them near windows, we could have light bulbs on so they could work at night, and we could really change the whole design of the factory. And the reason I'm telling this analogy is because I think in order for us to see huge benefit in using AI in healthcare, we're going to have to redesign how we're using it, and in some cases, maybe even redesign the way the hospital and the patient flow is. So we move forward. Where do we go? So we have these point solutions. I talked about 2 of them in the last section. But where we go is these foundational models. You've heard of large language models, and everybody's heard of GPTs, I guess, right? The generative pre-trained transformers, if you know what that is. And there's a cool story about that. I won't bore you. This is where we are today. If anybody's seen this is a really neat article that kind of summarizes all the large language models. But if anybody is AI guru and you follow people like Yan LeCun, they're saying, hey, we're not going to use LLMs anymore. And if you look at the indexing for OpenAI, they're talking about these agentic AI models using agents within AI. So I'm going to talk really quickly about doing such a thing and give you a couple examples. So we at GE, we're building a large foundational model that's going to be multimodal data. So the difference between your standard large language model is you ask it something, it's basically a text or a voice input, and you get a text or a voice output. Where we, going back to that remodeling the factory, what if we can take multimodal data sets? So things like imaging, text, genomic data, and all these different data sets, and we can plug those in on the input side, and on the output side, we can ask it for a diagnosis and another type of an image, a better recreated image, and we can develop these things faster with the foundational models. And then here's an example. I don't know if this paper just came out, so this is really cool. This is, it is a foundational model. It's in digital pathology, so it's a little bit out of our standard wheelhouse, but it's really neat. And the difference between this and, so the point solutions, I showed you in the last section, for example, the prostate, the bot image one. The input is an image and the output is a report saying this is positive, here's the BI-RADS score, here it is. This, if you look at what's happening here, is the pathologist is having a conversation now with the AI. So he can ask it questions. I see something in the slide here. I think this may be a cancer tumor. What do you think? What about these cells over here? And I think this is the way we're going to move into radiology as well. The radiologist is not going to just have a point solution spit out. It's going to be that dialogue, going back to the AI is bicycle of the mind. I love that concept because we're keeping the clinician in that loop, but now we're allowing them more flexibility. So when we talked about explainable AI this morning too. So right now that point solution, the bottom image, it comes back, it is what it is. It doesn't explain how it got there. You can't ask it any questions. And it's just a one-to-one type of solution. So if anybody was at the health conference recently in Vegas in October, we released, and again, this is not a product, and I should have a disclaimer at the bottom, some legal disclaimer from our lawyers, but this is an example of our first output from our foundational model that was a whole body x-ray. So if you look at the point solutions, typically you have a chest x-ray, you'd be looking at, for pneumonia, you'd be looking at one element. This is looking at the whole body, and if you look at the purple blob, that's the output from the foundational model. And then the sort of gray bubble reference report was from a real radiologist. And you can see they're getting pretty close, but the difference is you can now start to ask it questions, and it can give you answers back, and it's more of an interaction with the AI solution. I'm not going to spend a lot of time, this is very complex, but so everything I just talked about up to this point is you're asking things like ChatGPT. You have to go in and ask ChatGPT for something, or have some sort of dialogue with them. These agentic AI models, what they're doing is these are the four major things. They can perceive, reason, act, and learn. So they can look at an image that's coming through that may be for a pelvic CT and say, oh, you might want to look in the top. I think there might be a lung cancer noted in just the bottom of the lungs. You might need this follow-up. And then you can start to ask questions back and forward. And they can automate a lot of the process, and you can have different agents doing different things. So think about a tumor board. One agent may be a radiologist, one might be an oncologist, one might be a pathologist, et cetera. This is super early days, and if you followed Amazon, they've just released agentic AI within their platform. So it's new, but it's if you look at like IBM and a bunch of some of the large companies are thinking it might be the next big thing. Okay, so we're running on time here. I think we're good. I got to go through this super quick, but this is really neat. So AI knows things that we've never taught it. I don't know if anybody, so highly recommend, if you have not seen it, go watch the AlphaGo documentary. It's actually on YouTube, so you can watch it for free. But I love these two things where in Move 37, so basically they created this very complex solution to play Go, which is much more complex in terms of the number of moves that you can do than just chess. And what they did was they got, I think it was the number 11th in the world ranked, and he played against the machine, and it measured something like 20 million moves. But then what they did was they allowed it to play against itself. And all it had is the output was the score. And so that's where it really started to learn. It played millions and millions of moves against itself. And it really started to learn things that humans would not teach it. And so when it got to this is what, like the top champ in the world that played against it, what happened was on this Move 37, it divided the board, and that's this move we're showing here. And all the commentators said, oh, that's it, like AlphaGo's lost. What a stupid move. No human would ever do that move. And it went on to win the match because the human didn't know how to deal with it. So this is really cool. So the next match, he thinks about this and says, okay, you know what? This computer's been trained. I'm going to do something that I would never do, something completely new. And he was rocking back in his chair for 20 minutes, back and forward, and he pulled another move, and he actually won, and that's move 78 in the next match. And that was the only match out of 6 that he won. And then AlphaGo readapted and beat him in the next 2 matches. And I think Meta and some companies actually have they figured out how to beat AlphaGo. I got to skip through. This is the GAN father. So if anybody's familiar with these general adversarial networks, I don't have time to get into what they are. It's basically generative AI. This is how it happened. It was he was a PhD student for Yoshua Bengiois, and they decided, what's the next step in AI? We can now detect things in images. So he went home and created generative AI with a bunch of thumbnails, so it could recreate those images. And so where we moved into healthcare, why is this important to healthcare? It's because we can create synthetic images. Going back to those foundational models and agentic AI, we now go from the hundreds of thousands and tens of thousands of images into millions. So that whole body X-ray one, it was something like 8 million images we used to train it. And how did we get 8 million images? Is we use synthetic data. So in the past, we're able to generate, these are a set of chest X-rays that were generated by AI. And what we found is we're only able to get about 75% accurate with synthetic data. And then we needed the fine tuning, we needed actual human data, like real images in order to fine tune. What we're finding with these foundational models is the fine tuning layer is much smaller. So what we can do is we can use the synthetic data, and that's what we did with the foundational model. And that fine tuning layer is getting so small now that the amount of data we need to fine tune is fairly low. Highly recommend anybody who's interested in this space to follow this project called Cynthia. It's 40 partners that are building synthetic data sets for training AI models. And here's something, and I'm going to leave it, and I'm done now. So this is my last slide. But this was really, really neat. So synthetic data, these are brain lesions, and this was a paper, you can see the reference there as another Canadian scientist. And what it was, they actually created these synthetic images of these brain lesions. And when they used these to have the AI solution do labeling, they found, and these were like really odd looking. So the odder looking, like the ones that looked really good, the AI labeling component didn't work so well. But the ones that looked really odd, the labeling worked really, really well. So going back to the last part of this talk is AI has learned some things that we don't even know how it learned it, and we never taught it. But we can learn a lot of things from it, and when we can figure out what is happening here, I think there is a huge slope in terms of using synthetic data for training up these large language and foundational models. And I think I'm out of time. So I'll just conclude with, yes, I think AI is the bicycle for the mind, and I think it's much better than the Mac computer, so hopefully there's no Apple people get offended with that. But I think AI is going to be the bicycle for the mind. We're moving from point solutions into these multimodal, either agentic or foundational models, and I think that is the future of where we're going to apply the technology and redesign not the factory floor, but the way we're delivering healthcare. And then lastly, the synthetic data is going to help us move closer to that. And I'm really excited about the future. And with that, that's my last slide.